Say when. Hey guys, welcome back to Unleashed. I'm your host, Brent Henderson, and remember, we are the resistance. If you enjoy this podcast, always be sure to subscribe, give us a like, share this with someone who really needs to hear it, because what we talk about here isn't just information, it is transformation. And sometimes that transformation starts with facing the things that we've been trying to ignore, or the things that we're in denial that we really struggle with. So right now we are in the middle of the Big 5 Mankillers, and today we are on number 4, which is lust. Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I've had a number of men reach out to me after the last few episodes. They have been opening up, they've been asking questions, even wrestling through things like anger versus frustration, and what that really looks like in our lives. So that's why we're doing this, because when men start telling the truth, the enemy starts losing ground. So before we go any further, I want to remind you that this is part 4 of my Big 5 Mankillers series. I've already walked through lack of purpose, lack of respect, anger, and today we're going to be talking about lust. This is a hot topic. I'm really excited about it because this entire series is leading up to the release of my new book, The Big 5 Mankillers. The release date is on May 19th, and if you want to get a copy for yourself, or even better, for your men's group, you can go to Warner Press, and you can find the Big 5 Mankillers there. You can place your order for the Big 5 Mankillers, and here's something important. If you order this before Father's Day, you're going to get free shipping. That's what Warner Press is offering. That's a really big deal, especially if you're ordering this for your men's group. So if you've been tracking with this series and thinking, man, I want to go deeper with this, this is going to give you the structure and the tools to do exactly that. And remember, there's also a free downloadable facilitator's guide to help you walk through every single week with your men, so you don't have to worry about that. I'm going to say something right out of the gate. Lust isn't the problem, right? Lust is the symptom. So if lust is the symptom, then what does it look like when it's left unchecked? So I want to take you back for a few minutes, and this isn't just a story. This is my story. 2 boys about 12 years old. One of them was me. The other kid was one of my best friends growing up. His name was Steve. And we were the kind of kids who rode our bikes until the street lights came on, or until our parents called for us. We built forts in the woods. You know, we were always looking for that next adventure. Well, one day we found it. There was an old abandoned building that had been shut down years before. You know, there was broken windows, rusted metal doors. It was very quiet and creepy on the inside, kind of musty smelling. It was the kind of place you knew that you probably shouldn't be, which of course makes that a lot more interesting to 12-year-old boys. So what do? We go in. You know, as we were exploring, I climbed up onto this ledge. There was a doorway, and there was like an old stool, and I climbed up on this thing, put my hand up there, which is kind of weird, but I found something. It's like right out of a movie. There was a magazine. But of course, this wasn't just any magazine, and so I opened it up, and the first thing that I saw when I opened it was this topless woman. This is the first time I had ever seen a woman like this. She's totally exposed, like staring right back at me. I can remember her name. Her name was Eva or Ava Gardner, whatever it was. She was an actress, I think, back in the 60s or early 70s. But in that moment, something shifted. It wasn't just curiosity. There was something deeper going on. There was a pull, and it was a feeling like I had never experienced before. I didn't have a name for it at the time, but looking back, I now know exactly what it was. There were 2 things, pleasure and shame. I didn't tell anybody, I didn't talk about it, but that moment stayed with me for a long time. And what started as innocent curiosity got shaped by something that the world twisted, because there was no one there to explain it. 2 12-year-old boys, really? Both trying to make sense out of this? We didn't want to tell anybody because of the shame factor. So therefore, we have no one to kind of guide what we're seeing, how we're processing things. There's no one there to say, hey, guys, this is powerful stuff, and here's what you do with it. So instead, it just kind of sits there. It's unprocessed. It's unchallenged. And it started to form how I saw women and how I saw myself and what I believed about desire. I think back to that time in my life because my dad knew I was getting to the age where I was becoming curious about women. That's what 12-year-old boys do. Maybe it was because he had seen me take one of those old J.C. Penney catalogs off the shelf and put it back in a way that made it obvious that I had been looking at it, at least to a parent who knows how these things should be stacked up. And any young guy who ever picked up one of those catalogs knows that the women's lingerie section comes right after the jewelry section. A bunch of you guys are laughing right now. And one day, my dad pulls me aside and he says, "Hey, I know you've got questions. I know you're curious." So he tells me that he's got a book for me, something he had gotten ahead of time for when I would get to this age. And he said, anytime you want to look at it, it's there for you. The book was called Everything You've Always Wanted to Know About Sex But Are Afraid to Ask. He tells me that he's going to keep this in a drawer underneath some clothes. I think it was a sock drawer, so that I wouldn't feel embarrassed, if I wanted to go get it and read it. And I think that was good, but it wasn't enough. It really did fall short. Because what I really needed was a conversation. There was something about not being able to talk about it that kind of makes it feel kind of shameful. Like it had to be hidden, like in that drawer. Like I had to go uncover it on my own. And it became almost like a treasure map. That's the part of the problem that so many men face, because the enemy wants you to feel shame about something that God actually created. Now listen to me. Sexual desire is not the problem. God made it. It's powerful. It's good. It was designed for a purpose. But it was also designed to be within the safety of a marriage. But when it's not talked about, when it's hidden, when it's left for the world to define, it gets twisted. And here's the problem. What started as a curiosity gets shaped by whatever teaches it first. The truth is, what I really needed was a conversation, something that could help me understand that my curiosity was normal, it was good, it was designed by God. Not that the information that I wanted to know about had to be hidden away, because that made me feel dirty. There was a dangerous element to it, but it wasn't a dangerous for good. So let's kind of change this a little bit. Now, I want to go to Africa for a second, keeping in line with the Big Five Man Killers, because the animal that I use for lust in the Big Five Man Killers number 4 is the elephant. I have been close enough to an elephant to hit it with a rock and still not be able to see it. That sounds totally crazy. But once you see it, you can't unsee it, because an elephant doesn't sneak, it doesn't tiptoe. It just takes what it wants. And here's what most people don't realize. An elephant will walk up to a tree that's been growing for 30, 40, even 50 years, especially in the dry season, and knock it over like it's nothing, just to pull off a few branches or get to the roots. We call these things elephant toothpicks. They just kind of take them and rotate them in their mouth, they chew on them and get whatever liquid's in there. But something that took decades to grow is gone in a moment. That's what lust does. A man can build a marriage for decades, and in one moment, he can destroy all trust in that relationship. It's not just a man killer. Lust is a marriage killer. And there's another piece of this that a lot of people don't know. In parts of Africa, they started finding dead rhinos. They were gored. They were totally destroyed. They had massive holes, poked all through them on all sides. Nobody could figure this out, because rhinos don't do that to each other. There was something that was much bigger, much stronger, was attacking them. And eventually what they discovered, it was young bull elephants. Because in this part of Africa, there had been poachers who had killed off the older bulls. So now what you had was younger bulls growing up without any guidance at all. They had no older male teaching them what to do with this part of their life. Because when an elephant hits a phase called must, it's where their bodies are flooded with testosterone. They didn't know what to do with it. So they became incredibly aggressive. They were violent, they were destructive. They would knock rhinos over and just keep driving their tusks into them, rolling them over and over again. They called it rhino rolling. It wasn't coming from hunger, it wasn't coming from survival. This was misdirected power. This was strength, right? But without the wisdom. And men, we need to hear this. If we are not taking the time to teach our sons to disciple them, we are doing incredible damage. We are leaving them to figure out one of the most difficult stages of life on their own with no wisdom, with no direction, with no understanding of what to do with the strength and desire that God put inside of them. So what happens? The world teaches them. Culture teaches them. Porn teaches them instead of us. And men, we can't allow that. We must teach them how to defend themselves against this stuff, because if we don't, we are raising powerful men with no direction. God made men and women on purpose. Men are wired visually. That's God's design. But it's not the first glance that gets you in trouble, right? It's that second, third, and fourth. Jesus said, anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery in his heart. Jesus goes right after the heart because it's a heart issue. Women can lust too. So I want to make sure I include this because, they don't always lust visually, but maybe through desire for security, for attention, maybe validation. I was coaching a couple that I met with, and she was frustrated with her husband's struggle because he was always checking out a woman when they walked by. He would just look her up and down, right? She could see it. And she said, it's just so obvious, and frankly, it's embarrassing to me. So I asked her how this issue was embarrassing to her, and she said, because it's a reflection on me. I said, how's that? She said, because it must be obvious to everyone that I'm not enough for him. So I kind of looked at her and I said, so what I hear you saying is that because he struggles with lust, the reason is because you're obviously not enough woman for him, right? She thought for a moment. She goes, no, I know he thinks that I'm beautiful, but I can't stand it when he looks at other women. And then she adds, why would you want hamburger when he can have steak at home? I just want him to desire only me. So I asked her a question. I said, how does it feel when a man notices your beauty? And she paused for a second and she said, I like knowing I can still turn heads. There it was. Same root, same desire. It's to feel seen, to feel wanted. It goes both ways. In 1 John 2:16, it says, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. And what that's talking about is physical craving, visual desire, and a need for importance. And all of those point to the same thing, which is looking outside of God for fulfillment. I want to give you an example that I created a long time ago to show you how this actually works. It's what I call God's invisible dog fence. When I'm teaching small groups about discerning God's voice, the enemy's voice, or was it last night's pizza? What is it that's causing these thoughts that I'm having? I use something that I call God's invisible dog fence. And almost every group has someone who has one of these. He has an invisible dog fence. So I'll ask that person, I'll say, why did you install that invisible dog fence? And if you know how it works, they have that shock collar on there. They get too close, they get the shock, they get the pain. And they'll say, well, it's to protect the dog so the dog doesn't get hurt or maybe get out and hurt somebody else. So then I asked, tell me how it works. And they'll explain, this dog wears that collar. The closer it gets to the boundary, it starts to beep. I don't know if you've ever seen that kid on YouTube. He's got one of these shock collars on and they keep turning it up, until he gets to like number 4 and the kid's on the ground. I'm like, that's called brain damage. Who knows why? But the closer the dog gets, the louder the beeping. I asked then, what happens if the dog ignores the warning? And they reply by saying, well, the dog gets shocked. So then I ask, why would you use something that causes pain on something you love? And every time they say, because we love the dog. Because once the dog learns the warning, it avoids the pain. So then I ask, if your dog crosses the line and gets shocked, do you just run down there and kick it? I said that one time I was doing a thing down in Kentucky, and I said, you just go down and kick the dog? This guy goes, yeah, buddy. I'm like, okay. But of course you don't go down and kick the dog, right? You go get the dog. You bring the dog back. You bring it back to where it's safe. And then you walk the dog around the boundary again because it knows your voice and it knows it's loved. It's learning to trust you what is good and what is bad, where to go and where not to go. That's how God works. The closer we get to what's not good, we feel it. Lust, anger, jealousy, rage, right? Those aren't random. That's the beep. So lust isn't the problem. Lust is the warning. When we cross the line, God doesn't abandon us. He comes after us. These are teachable moments. I've said this before. You don't learn before the mistake. You learn after the mistake. And here's the thing. This is not a salvation issue. This is a maturity issue. Guilt says, I did something bad. Shame says, I am something bad. Shame says, don't tell Dad. But what does conviction say? Go get Dad. I need him now. Men talk about lust and, stories we shouldn't be talking about with other guys at places like deer camp, maybe sitting in hunting blinds, maybe on the golf course, but we don't talk about it in church. And every man listening right now knows exactly what I said is true. It's real. But those thoughts that you have, when they pop into your head, first of all, those thoughts don't come from you. They come from the enemy. So you need to make sure you understand where they're coming from. But then you also need to understand that those thoughts are not your identity. It doesn't make you a bad person because you have these thoughts. Billy Graham said one time, when a strong man takes a stand, the spines of others are often stiffened. Be that man, because changed men change men. Lust leaves you empty. Shame tries to finish the job. That's going to be next week where we're going to talk about shame. You don't want to miss that because it's all connected. But again, guys, remember that your identity doesn't come from the things that you do, the thoughts that come through your head. But do you have the God of the universe in you? Because once Christ has come into you, that is your one true identity in him, fully complete, totally forgiven. You have everything you will ever need in him. Father God, thank you that you've called us sons and not slaves to sin. Thank you that even in our struggle, you have not walked away from us. God, help us to see our bodies and desires the way you see them, sacred, powerful, redeemed. Help us to see ourselves the way you see us, not defined by failure, but redeemed by grace. God, teach us to recognize these lies and how to replace them with truth. When temptation comes, remind us that we already have everything we will ever need in you. Create in us clean hearts, O God. Renew steadfast spirits within us. Give us the strength to walk by the Spirit and not gratify the desires of the flesh. Help us to choose truth over counterfeit, connection over isolation, surrender over hiding, and worship over escape. And when we fall, remind us to come back quickly, not to hide, not to run, but to be restored. Teach us to love more and need less, because we already have everything we will ever need in you. We love you, Father. Amen. Guys, if you're being changed through these podcasts, if you're finding real value here, then I just want to ask you to pray about coming alongside us at unleashed.men and help us support this cause of what seeing men's lives changed, because changed men really do change men. You can go to unleashed.men and then click on the About tab and then donate. We are connected to World Renewal, which is a 501c3, so this is 100% tax deductible. And that really helps us keeping moving forward and reaching men for Christ and teaching them how to pick up their sword once again and get back in the battle. Because when a man knows who he is in Christ, that he's been created in the image of the living God, when he is no longer held captive by the opinions of others or cares whether he lives or dies, that man is now extremely dangerous for good, because he's been unleashed. We'll see you next time.